He has already formed an intent to kill as a result of premeditation and deliberation. It's been thought out. He has decided to do it. He's bought a gun for the purpose. He's bought a bus ticket. He's taken the bus. He's come over there. He's loaded the gun prior to the first visit. He's ready to kill. He has considered the reasons for and against it, and having done so, he has decided to kill.
November 6, 1967, Dana and Benson Schaefer welcomed their daughter Rebecca Lucille into the world. An only child, Rebecca was adored by her parents. Her father Benson was a child psychologist, and mother Dana was employed at Portland Community College. Growing up in Oregon in a religious Jewish family, Rebecca initially thought about becoming a rabbi, combining her faith and her love for other people. She loved the outdoor life, especially horse riding, and this is something her and her father bonded even more over. As she moved into her junior year, Rebecca started modelling and acting in amateur dramatic clubs. Her big smile and striking brown eyes shone through in her photo shoots, and her future career in front of the camera was starting to form. She appeared in adverts for department store catalogues as well as TV commercials. But she soon decided it was time for a change. She spoke to her parents about fulfilling a career as a full-time model, and they agreed. Aged just 16, she took a big leap. She moved across the country alone to the city of dreams, New York. With its bright lights, big atmosphere and social buzz, New York was where many a hopeful performer would go in a bid to further their careers. Although her parents were understandably nervous, Rebecca said to her father, "Do you remember what you said to me, Dad? Sometimes you have to choose between adventure and regret." Although the city was big and overwhelming, 16-year-old Rebecca was more than a match for it. Within the first week of living there, she saw a strange man pacing in the subway with a sharpened screwdriver. A terrified young woman was sat in front of her, and Rebecca hurried over, pretending to know the girl, and said, "It's so great to see you, let's go get a coffee," and pulled her up the stairs. As she settled into her new life in the Big Apple, she began attending the Professional Children's School. The elite Professional Children's School educates children who work in the entertainment industry, and boasted stars such as Carrie Fisher and Christopher Walken as part of their prestigious alumni. It wasn't long before her perseverance and hard work paid off. In 1984, she got her first big break. She booked a 6-month recurring role in the ABC soap opera One Life to Live, playing Annie Barnes. After this, she landed a small role in Radio Days, the famous Woody Allen comedy. Sadly, her performance was edited from the film, and only a brief scene which features her remains. Despite her early success as a model, she soon found herself coming up against the tough expectations of the fashion industry. She stood at 5'7", and many agencies considered her to be too short to model for high fashion. She struggled to find further work, so she decided to leave New York. In 1985, she made another ambitious move, this time to Japan, to try and add more to her modelling portfolio. But, once again, her height and weight were considered a problem. After this, she decided to return to New York and focus solely on her acting dreams. Undeterred, she started working as a waitress to support herself in between acting jobs, and carried on auditioning wherever and whenever she could. She was sharing an apartment with 5 other people, and just as her phone line got cut off, as she could no longer pay the bills, she booked a big role. She had recently shot for the popular 17 magazine, which caught the attention of TV producers. They were casting for the comedy My Sister Sam, starring Pam Dawber, who had become a household name thanks to the hit show Mork and Mindy. Rebecca auditioned and won the role of the feisty and funny Patty Russell, a teenager who makes the journey to live with her sister Sam after the death of their parents. Her life changed instantly, and she flew to Los Angeles to start filming the CBS show.
Hi, I'm Patty Russell, and this is my sister Sam. I just moved in.
We haven't lived together since we were kids.
I was raised by her aunt and uncle.
Yeah, things sure have changed. I used to dress her. I can't wear this out in public.
This makes up for the haircut you gave me when I was 3.
Everything starts like a knock at the door. Anywhere is home where there's someone there to share it. There's room enough for two in the night.
Her parents couldn't be prouder of her move to Hollywood and were a little more relieved now she was living closer to them, as well as her grandfather, who was living nearby in West Hollywood. The pilot of My Sister Sam aired in October 1986 and had a great time slot in between 2 already very popular shows. She and co-star Pam immediately hit it off, and Pam took 18-year-old Rebecca under her wing, eventually moving her into her house. Rebecca was bright and bubbly and immediately popular with audiences. She became the spokesperson for Thursday's Child, an organisation that helps children and teenagers with various issues, including eating disorders, abuse and suicide. Appearing on various chat shows, magazine covers and even hosting the Thanksgiving parade for CBS, Pam Dawber could see Rebecca's life as a new and young celebrity was rapidly changing. Pam often gave her advice on how to navigate the celebrity world. Pam herself had issues with stalking and obsessive fans in the past, and said she and the team told Rebecca, "You're on a hit show, we're going to go on this show for a while. You never put your real name on your mailbox, Rebecca. Never put your real name on your mailbox." In 1987, while shooting My Sister Sam, the security at Warner Brothers Studios phoned Rebecca's team and asked if she knew a man that had come to meet her. 19-year-old Robert John Bardo had turned up to the set carrying roses and a huge teddy bear and claimed he knew the actress and wanted to see her. Rebecca confirmed she didn't know him and they did not allow him entry. Robert said he was frustrated as he couldn't understand why Rebecca would turn him away. A month later, Robert returned to Warner Brothers, this time extremely agitated and carrying a knife. Security were now aware of who he was and again stopped him from getting in. He was taken into the security office and was told he needed to stop, as the obsession he had for the actress was going too far. The head of security was concerned and informed the production company about what had happened. Rebecca continued on with her life and various filming projects. Although My Sister Sam initially was a success with viewers, it was sadly cancelled in 1988, halfway through the second season, leaving many episodes unaired. The show had changed its time slot, and this impacted it massively. Rebecca was disappointed but continued to throw herself into auditioning. She was then cast in a string of roles including scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills, The End of Innocence, and the television film Out of Time. July 18, 1989, 21-year-old Rebecca was now living in a West Hollywood apartment. As well as her career going from strength to strength, her personal life was in a great place too. She met 23-year-old TV and film director Brad Silberling on a blind date at UCLA Film School, and Brad said the chemistry was instant. Brad Silberling went on to direct many successful TV shows and films, including Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events and City of Angels, and the talented young duo had had talks of moving in together. On July 18th, Rebecca was prepping for a big audition for The Godfather Part 3 and was waiting for the script to be delivered to her door. When she heard the doorbell ring, she quickly answered, but it wasn't the script delivery she was hoping for. Stood in front of her was Robert John Bardo. It was the same man who had appeared twice at Warner Brothers Studios, and he was clutching a letter and autograph she had once sent to him. Robert John Bardo was born in January 1970. The youngest of 7 children, he had a troubled childhood. After being abused by a sibling, he was placed in foster care when he spoke about committing suicide and was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. At the age of 15, he was briefly institutionalized to treat emotional problems and dropped out of school shortly after. Robert was only 19 years old and had developed a dangerous obsession with Rebecca Schaeffer. Prior to his fixation with her, he was infatuated with the child peace activist Samantha Smith, who was tragically killed in a plane crash in 1985. When she passed away, his attention turned to Rebecca. He started writing numerous letters to her after seeing her on a commercial for My Sister Sam. One of his letters she replied to, telling him it was one of the nicest letters she had ever got. What started as him being a fan of the character Patty quickly turned into a fixation with the actress Rebecca. He watched and taped every episode of My Sister Sam and bought every magazine he could find with her in. His room quickly became almost a shrine to the actress. He travelled by bus to Los Angeles in 1987, hoping to meet her on the set of My Sister Sam, but failing to get past security twice, he returned to Tucson and briefly lost interest with the actress. His obsession shifted towards artists Debbie Gibson, Madonna, and Tiffany Darwish. In 1989, Robert watched Rebecca in the comedy Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. In one scene, she appeared in bed with a male actor. Robert became so enraged and jealous by the scene, he decided that she needed to be punished for becoming, in his words, another Hollywood whore. The teenage Robert wrote a disturbing letter to his sister, saying if he couldn't have Rebecca, then he wouldn't allow anyone else to. Part of the letter read, "I have an obsession with the unattainable, and I have to eliminate something I cannot attain." After trying and failing to get Rebecca's address through her agent, Robert came across an article in People magazine which gave him a new idea. Arthur Richard Jackson had stalked and stabbed actress Teresa Saldana in 1982, and through the article in People magazine, Robert learned that Arthur had used a private investigator to obtain her address. Fortunately, Teresa Saldana survived the frightening attack and went on to found the Victims for Victims organisation. She also participated in lobbying for the 1990 anti-stalking law and the 1994 Driver's Privacy Protection Act. Robert decided to use the same method as Arthur Jackson and paid a detective agency $250 to find Rebecca's address using DMV records. His brother helped him get hold of a gun after Robert himself was refused due to being too young and disclosing mental health problems on a form he had to fill out at the gun shop. For a third and final time, Robert travelled to Los Angeles and stayed in the neighbourhood where Rebecca lived, showing people pictures of her and asking neighbours if she actually lived there. Once he was certain that her address was correct, on the morning of July 18th, he rang her doorbell just after 10 a.m. This encounter clearly unnerved Rebecca. She politely shook his hand and was pleasant to him, but asked him never to come to her home again. Robert was shocked and went to a nearby diner to have some food before returning to her apartment an hour later. He claimed he did this as he had forgotten to give her a cassette tape. According to Robert himself, she answered the door again, but had a cold look on her face. Robert said, "She had this kid voice, sounded like a little brat or something, said I was wasting her time. No matter what, I thought that was a very callous thing to say to a fan." Without warning, he pulled out a gun and shot her in the heart at point-blank range. According to Robert, she fell to the floor of her doorway, screaming, "Why? Why?" Robert Bardo fled the scene, and shortly after, Rebecca's neighbour, who had heard the shot and the blood-curdling scream, rushed to the doorway. He felt no pulse and phoned 911. She was swiftly taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but there was nothing they could do, and tragically, 21-year-old Rebecca Schaeffer was pronounced dead just 30 minutes after arriving. The following day in Tucson, several motorists phoned police to report a man running through traffic on Interstate 10. It was Robert Bardo. He told officers he was devastated by the death of Rebecca Schaeffer and was acting out because of it. An incredibly suspicious thing to say, police faxed an image of Robert over to the LA detectives, who confirmed this was the man they were looking for. After hearing about the murder of Rebecca on the news, Robert's sister told police about the letter he had written to her. He was promptly arrested and extradited to California. He confessed immediately to what he had done. He was charged with first-degree murder, and prosecutor Marsha Clark would take on the trial 2 years later. Marcia became most well known for being part of the prosecution team on the O.J. Simpson trial in 1995, defending Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. In Robert's case, she pushed hard for what is known as a bench trial. This means that the outcome would be decided by a judge rather than a jury. Robert Bardo agreed to this in exchange for the death penalty being taken off the table. Steve Galindo, a veteran public defender, was in charge of Robert's defence team. Judge Dino Fulgoni presided, and he was reported to be one of the top legal experts on psychiatric evidence in the state of California. Despite his confession, Robert still pled not guilty. His defence team argued he could not have premeditated the murder due to his mental health issues, something Marcia was keen to disprove.
You tell me approximately how many contacts you had with the defendant pertaining to locating Rebecca Schaeffer?
About 10.
During the course of your conversations with Mr. Bardo, over the 10 contacts you indicated you had, was there ever any indication to you that he was violent or posed any menace or threat to yourself or the party he was trying to locate?
None.
Did you become aware at some point that your brother was interested in the actress starring in My Sister Sam?
Yes, I did.
And about a month before the murder occurred, did the defendant tell you that he had in fact hired a private detective to find Rebecca Schaeffer?
I believe he did.
Had he ever indicated to you a desire to take the gun to Los Angeles on previous occasions?
He gave some indications that I inferred suggested that. So, I mean, in a roundabout way, yes, he did.
Yes, a man came up to me and stopped me and showed me a picture and asked me if I knew this girl, if I'd seen this girl in the neighborhood.
And do you see that man in court today?
Yes, I do.
Could you please point him out?
Right over there.
Do you recall your brother showing you a publicity photo, a black and white publicity photo of an actress?
Yes.
And do you recall who that was?
I didn't know the name at the time, but it was Rebecca Schaeffer.
Weidrich then tells of a letter Bardo gave her less than 3 weeks before the murder.
What did you feel upon reading this letter?
I felt that he was upset about something and that he was going to do harm to himself. And the hint at the bottom had dates, like on a tombstone.
Yes, you're referring to the bottom of the letter where it says, it's encased in 2 lines. Between the 2 lines it says, hint, arrow, 1967-1989.
Yes.
But Robert Bardo was not born in 1967. Rebecca Schaeffer was. Weidrich remembers the night she found out the real meaning of the letter.
I started screaming and it just was hysterical.
The defence team called psychiatrist Dr. Dietz to the stand, and he claimed that Robert may have schizophrenia, and that is what may have led him to commit the crime.
By January of '84, Robert Bardo had become particularly interested in and had observed to be awed by a teacher in a special class he was in for gifted students, that teacher being Mrs. Morris. He had a tremendous attraction to Mrs. Morris and saw her as a friend, as someone special, as the only one who had been nice to him. He was noted to have been exceeding the usual bounds of student-teacher propriety. He also wrote that when he listens to the radio, he is possessed by it.
Over the prosecution's objection, the defense played a song from the rock group U2's Joshua Tree album. Until this point in the trial, the defendant had remained composed in the courtroom. But once the song Exit was played, he sang and strummed to the music.
He told me, after describing the meaning of those lyrics, that the first effort he made to find, that is to visit Rebecca Schaeffer, had been toward the end of May or early June 1987. And he said that he was even thinking of hurting her at that time because she sounded arrogant in TV Guide, but he wanted to see her before she was a big star.
Bardo tells of the chilling moment when he approaches Rebecca Schaeffer's doorway.
And then I look, I see him down the hallway. I'm through. I was like so happy staring. I was like, it's like, there she is, I don't have to shoot any security guards to get her, and she's right there in front of me, And there's no big security guards, she wasn't dressed up glamorously like some people. And I was just, and she's just right there, it's just me and her, Grabbed it, with this kind of, I grabbed the door, gun still in the bed, reached around, grabbed it on the chair. This.
Isn't it true that even in a clinical setting, a psychiatrist may unwittingly plant a suggestion for a symptom simply by routine admitting procedures, such as, do you hear voices, do you have visual hallucinations, do you see things, that sort of thing. Isn't that true?
Yes, it is.
You cannot say that when he approached her door the first time that he was operating under a command hallucination, can you?
No.
And you cannot say that when he left her door the first time he was operating under a command hallucination, can you?
No.
And you cannot say that when he returned the second time he was operating under a command hallucination, can you?
No.
And you cannot say that when he shot her he was operating under a command hallucination either, can you?
No, I can't, and I didn't.
Marcia Clark hoped to prove that he did in fact plan the killing over several months.
And it was not a normal 13-year-old, nor with the notion that he was not a normal 19-year-old. A normal person doesn't stalk and murder a celebrity he's never met. Where is the evidence of delusion? That the defendant deluded himself into believing that maybe someday Rebecca might be his friend? Well, then haven't we all been guilty of being delusional at some point in our lives?
Robert was carrying a copy of The Catcher in the Rye when he shot Rebecca, which he threw onto the roof of a building as he ran away. He insisted that it was purely coincidental, even though it emulated Mark David Chapman, who had also been carrying a copy with him when he shot and killed John Lennon. It came out that during the 18 months before he killed Rebecca, he had been arrested 3 times and charged with domestic violence and disorderly conduct. His neighbours also said that he had exhibited unwarranted threatening behaviour towards them. Judge Fulgoni agreed with the prosecution.
I think it is very clear that this is a killing by lying in wait. Find that Dr. Dietz's opinion is flawed, it is biased. I'm not saying that the defendant is a normal person. The defendant is not a normal person. The defendant has some kind of a mental disorder or problem. And I'll even give him the benefit of the doubt and consider him to have some kind or degree of schizophrenia. But the doctor himself admitted that schizophrenics can premeditate, that they can lie in wait, and they can intend to kill. Did he intend to kill? Obviously he intended to kill. But all that gives rise to a naked intent to kill is second-degree murder. What about first-degree murder? Did he premeditate and deliberate? Obviously he premeditated and deliberated. It's my job to make a determination as to how serious this defendant's mental condition is, how it affects him, and more importantly, how it affected him on the day of the killing. You have a man who's been planning and premeditating to kill someone. He goes to her door, and the encounter is pleasant. What he wants now, after thinking about it for a half hour to an hour, is another pleasant encounter. He goes there, and the encounter is not pleasant. He has already formed an intent to kill as a result of premeditation and deliberation. It's been thought out. He has decided to do it. He's bought a gun for the purpose. He's bought a bus ticket. He's taken the bus. He's come over there. He's loaded the gun prior to the first visit. He's ready to kill. He has considered the reasons for and against it, and having done so, he has decided to kill.
Marcia Clark's hard work paid off, and in October 1991, Robert John Bardo was found guilty of the murder of Rebecca Schaeffer.
The time has come to make a decision. I find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder, both as premeditated and lying in wait.
On December 20th, 1991, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A year after the murder, Robert gave an interview in which he said, "I was a fan of hers and I may have carried it too far. But a lot of things have appeared in the press to make me out to be a monster. If I had one wish where if it was ever to come true, it would be for Rebecca Schaeffer to be alive today." Rebecca was buried in Portland, Oregon, and her service was attended by over 300 people. Her death influenced her boyfriend at the time, Brad Silberling, to write and direct the film Moonlight Mile, about a man's journey with grief after his fiancée is murdered. As a consequence of Robert obtaining Rebecca's address, as well as Arthur Jackson getting Teresa Saldana's details through the use of private detectives, the US Congress passed the Driver's Privacy Protection Act in 1994. This prohibits state departments of motor vehicles from disclosing the home address of state residents. The case also prompted the 1990 passage of America's first anti-stalking laws. In 2007, Robert Bardo was stabbed 11 times in the maximum security unit at Mule Creek State Prison in California. He was treated and survived, returning to jail soon after. As of 2020, he is serving his time at the Avenal State Prison in Avenal, California. He frequently draws artwork of famous people, including Rebecca Schaeffer. "21-year-old Rebecca Schaeffer was killed before her life had even properly started. She fought hard for her dreams and the career that she adored so much. The drive she had would have undoubtedly continued to push her forward. Immensely talented and ambitious, she had much more to achieve both personally and professionally. Her tragic and untimely death prompted some big and much needed changes in the law, and her vibrant and kind-hearted spirit is kept alive by those that knew and loved her.